Good morning. Gary DeWaal here, and this is Bridging the Week for April 7th to 11th, and today is April 14, 2014. A surprising proposal to amend provisions of U.S. law that govern exchange-traded derivatives and certain OTC swaps, as well as the oversight of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, was introduced last week on a bipartisan basis by 4 members of the House of Representatives Agriculture Committee, and later approved by the full committee. Yes, I said it right, on a bipartisan basis. Does that phrase even exist anymore in Washington, D.C.? I guess so. Wow. In addition, last week, the Basel Committee awaited final rules telling banks how their capital will be impacted by their exposure to clearinghouses. These are all important stories I will cover this week and more, but I need to be brief, as most of us Americans have to finalize our tax forms by April 15th for mandatory filing with our Internal Revenue Service. So, let's get going. As I said, last week, the House Agriculture Committee approved proposed amendments to the law governing U.S. futures and swaps trading and industry participants that, if adopted, would significantly change the way the Commodity Futures Trading Commission operates and require the agency to issue rules instead of guidance to govern cross-border swap dealing, while exempting a broad class of non-U.S. persons from U.S. swaps requirements. The bill also would reduce and clarify obligations of certain end users in connection with their use of swaps, impose an annual obligation on future commission merchants, chief compliance officers, to assess the internal compliance programs of their employer, and expand the definition of bona fide hedging. The bill contains a host of other measures too, and proposes to reauthorize the existence of the CFTC. By law, the agency's authority is subject to periodic renewals, and its last authority expired last year on September 30th. Under the bill, the Commission must also prepare a study of high-frequency trading within 1 year. Separately, the Senate Agriculture Committee voted to advance to the full Senate for its consideration the nominations of Timothy Massad as CFTC Chair and Sharon Bowen and J. Christopher Giancarlo as CFTC Commissioners. The fate of the proposed futures law amendments, as well as the timing of any action by the full Senate regarding the 3 potential new CFTC commissioners, is uncertain at this time. The Basel Committee on Banking Supervision has issued final rules regarding how banks must address, from a capital perspective, their exposure to central clearinghouses. These rules effectively describe how banks must reserve certain amounts against their capital to guard against possible losses in connection with their trading activities, as well as their obligations as members of clearinghouses, for example, default fund and other waterfall obligations. These rules are complicated, they got a lot of math too, but I try my best to explain them as simply as I can on the article version of Bridging the Week. Check it out on my website. These new rules are effective January 1st, 2017. A rule enforcement review of OneChicago issued last week by the CFTC recommended that the exchange ensure its compliance surveillance department is adequately staffed to meet its self-regulatory obligations and increase the frequency and number of its spot checks for exchange of futures for physical transactions and block trades, among other matters. Am I getting a sense of deja vu all over again, as Yogi Berra would say? Remember the CFTC's rule review of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange last summer that similarly criticized its oversight of EFPs? And what followed? A proposed rule to eliminate all transitory EFPs, except for those involving foreign currency, and many CME enforcement actions. Let's see what happens here. By the way, I'm hearing the CME will likely release its final rule regarding transitory EFPs this week, maybe as early as Monday. Can't wait to see. As you'll recall, the CFTC previously provided a process for certain European-based multilateral trading facilities to be exempt from registration as swap execution facilities in order to facilitate swap transactions with U.S. persons. The MTFs have an automatic short-term exemption through May 14th of this year, by which time they must apply for longer-term exemption. Last week, the CFTC aggregated all its obligations of qualified multilateral trading facilities to operate without registration as CEFs in one no-action letter, but included some additional requirements too. Check out the details on my website. And finally, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority has begun formally to consider the effectiveness of its rules dealing with communications to the public as well as gifts, gratuities, and non-cash compensation. The review process will result in findings, and if the findings recommend modification of the rules, FINRA will address this in a separate rulemaking process. Comments from the public are sought by May 8th. What are the chances this process will result in less regulation? I'm not totally optimistic, but I hope any new rules are more rational. Current $100 annual gifts and entertainment limits per recipient per year is probably a bit low given inflation rates since these caps were first enacted decades ago. Well, that's it for Bridging the Week this week. I have a shiny and flashy new website design I'm unveiling this week, so check it out. As always, there's more information on each article discussed here, and more stories on the article version of Bridging the Week on my website. Check out that too. Well, until next week, don't forget to pay your taxes, have a great week, and ciao!